First, I want to ask you here, how many people speak Wolof? So that's the proof that the Wolof rice is not Nigerian. I stop. I won't talk about the Wolof rice all the time. So maybe another talk. So as you know, creativity in Africa is abundant, you know. There's abundant creativity, and there's is the reality that we are consuming a large quantity of product designed in Europe and made in China. There is a very little industry in Africa. Our industry is local artisans making the same object over and over again. Without industry, it is hard to practice industrial design. Design existed in Africa a long time ago, even before the colonization. And I will say it doesn't help when two French presidents challenged our history and civilization. First, Sarkozy, in 2007 in Dakar, he said, "The tragedy of Africa is that the African has not fully entered into history." That was in Dakar. 10 years later, the President Macron said that Africa has a civilizational problem. They should visit the African section of the Met Museum in New York or the Quai Branly Museum in Paris to reconsider. We are all designers in Africa. I know this because I grew up in Dakar. I will talk a little bit about myself. I spent all my childhood drawing. I don't remember a moment where I didn't have a pen and a paper. Well, when I was 15, I fell in love for the first time. And during this year, I didn't make any drawings. And then she released me. But the thing is, my parents saw that I was crazy. I would lock myself in my room with paper and a simple ball pen, and I would tell myself a story that I would then illustrate it. Without knowing it, I was forging the main tool that will serve me later as a designer, like drawing. My first relationship with design was with my mother. In her everyday life, she was a teacher. But my mother would draw a dress. The neighborhood tailor would make the dress for her. She created her own interpretation of this famous traditional Senegalese boubou. If she needed a table, she would draw the table, and a carpenter will make it for her. And I want to add this. She will make the best Senegalese national meal called the Djebou, known as the Wolof rice. She had all these tailors, carpenters, metal workers as her collaborators. So what I meant is I grew up with her design process. And I think the design process is really important in the creation. And I think I got a glance of it when I grew up next to her. But I didn't know it was design. I never imagined that I could be a designer 20 years later. But we all African, we grew up in an environment that forced us to be creative. In Senegal, people design the object they need, inspired by catalog or by your neighbor. You want to copy the dress of your sister or your cousin. We even build our own home in this fashion. I don't know why, but we don't like to hire architects. It's not in our habit. And some are architectural disaster, but that's for another TED Talk. When I was 16, my parents sent me to school in France. This is where I discovered that there was school of design. And even in France, in that time, in 1986, design was very new, And so I discovered that there's design school. When I spoke to my father, the first time I told him, I want to do design. He gave me a hard look, He said, what? I don't want to have a Rasta man in my house. I say, ah bon? So art for our African fathers wasn't enough solid, They expected us to be a lawyer, a accountant, maybe an architect, but the relation they have with the architect. But, I discovered that I could draw a motorcycle, logos, boats, and even iron. Designing iron, it could be a job. And that is how I entered the design school. Even my father, who didn't know what design was, he came around. Actually, I remember the day after he accepted, I entered his room, and his bed was full of a book around design, a magazine around design. So I started my career designing car at Renault. I was young, 24 years old. Of course, I was involved in designing the most complex product in the world. I was living my childhood dream by this time, but I was equipped with much more than a ball pen. Well, I designed a few interiors at Renault. And in 2001, just after the 9/11, my boss called me. His name was Patrick Lequéban. And he asked me if I want to go to New York. I said, why? No, there's a designer in New York. Her name is Birsel. We hire her for work on a project for Renault. Sometime Renault will hire an external firm, design firm, to have a different look. And my boss, he told me, and even my colleague, oh, you're going to love her. You're going to spend 3 months with her. You're going to finish this project with her. And they told her the same thing. So the first thing I know about this Turkish woman, she's Turkish, and it was that she designed the most comfortable toilet seat. We say the loo here, right, in the world. So Aisha would become my wife. And partner, at the beginning, you have the employee, you hide yourself, you date, you send. I don't know if we didn't have SMS at this time, Bon. So when she was pregnant with our first daughter, I resigned from Renault. They cry, and my career took a different direction. And I thought, so I moved to New York. Well, in New York, the project I was working on was very different. We were doing some office system for Herman Miller, kitchenware for Target, and also some electronic concept for Hewlett-Packard. But when I was designing car at Renault, I was mainly focused on the product itself, or the object. But it's really when I was in the States, the United States, when I was not working anymore for any company, I started to put the user at the center of my process. Being my own boss came with an unexpected benefit. I no longer need to ask someone else the permission to follow my interest. I was really interested in my native Africa to see what's going on there. So I started to go back and forth and spend more time in Dakar. And actually, I was wondering how my design experience will participate in Africa's economic growth. So if design is to think of the user, I wonder who was thinking of the African user. When you look at Africa and you look at all this number, this very, I don't want to say tragic number, the specific number, you know, most of the time they're talking about, oh, Africa, the population will double in 2050. The population will be, you know, there will be too much people. The mobility will be a problem. So we will have a lot of problems. We'll have the water problem, the drinkable water problem, access to electricity. So we will be more, but a lot of our problem will be double. So this is one of the observations that I had. But I'm not the only one who is interested. And this is like a warning, I will say. We African, I think we are a gold mine of consumer. And many Western companies are taking notes. I mean, you know, they say, oh, Africa, you know, we're in a good situation. Everybody is watching at us. You know, oh, we are number one, you know. But the Western companies are thinking differently. Say, okay, this is more user, so more consumer. So I think that the designer, we have an essential role to play to transform this gold mine to our advantage. We are a little bit rebels, you know, in any of us. We have a little bit of rebels in us, you know, a little bit of Sankara, you know. And in this rebellion, we need partners. Like my mother, who got to know tailor and carpenters, I first got to know local artisans in these trips. Obviously, at first, there were more social exchange. You know, you get to know each other, to speak, to know the family. You know, there's something that we call in Dakar, salam alek. When you ask, you say, hello, how are you? How's your father, your mother, your aunt, your brother, the sheep, the house, your son, the son of your son. But what was interesting there is if you work design something for a Western company, you could start a task share that will take like 4 years to develop. A car will be 3 or 2 years, so it was too long. But what was interesting what was impressing for me in Senegal, so I would sketch an idea in the morning, and I will go to talk to them in the afternoon, and the next day they will have a prototype, you know, something you can ready, so you can sit here. You can see I was doing a bench for Moroso, and you have to adapt also yourself to certain conditions. If in America you have 3D drawings and you can print out the full-size drawing, there in Dakar, if you work with the artisan and they shop by the sidewalk, you have to do yourself, you have to do the full-size drawing. So I was really impressed by the know-how of this artisan. What they could do with the material they use, the value they literally held in their hands. And I was also impressed by the speed which they could make things. So everybody knows this kind of bottle, I say. But in Africa, design is not a luxury, it's a necessity. The more I worked with this talented artisan, the more I realized design is an economic necessity. As Africans, we are used to making things with what we have. Someone who wants to sell peanut will use small water bottle for packaging. If your car light is broken, you'll tape a plastic container. People will refurbish all the chair. So I call this chair the eternal chair, with material that they have. The results are beautiful. I mean, I'm seduced. I found that when by the time also, I didn't mention this, but when I started going to Dakar, I went to other countries in Africa. I started to discover Africa, Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast, never been to Uganda, but Botswana. So there's like a link between all these countries. But the result is beautiful. The more difficulty you have, the more creative you are. And I learned to draw everything with a ball pen because it's the only thing that I have. That was my only tool. I think this is the African spirit, when the constraint make us more creative. A designer in Africa will create objects that look like us. I'm not worried about it. What we need is for product and services to be designed in Africa, made in Africa, and consumed by Africans. And we could even export them. This must be our stand. Products that correspond to our user, their culture, their ritual, and habits. On this picture here, it's my family. There's my two sisters-in-law, the kids. There's the friends eating in the middle. There's another woman who's laying down, but she's texting maybe on WhatsApp. But this is how we live, and how we love to live. Because even when we have, a living room with a very nice sofa. I mean, people will prefer to stay, in Senegal. I don't know about Nigeria. They prefer to stay close to the floor. But design in Africa cannot be only for the elite. It cannot be summed as African fabrics designed in Holland or exhibition of African design. And by the way, I don't really like the term African design, but this is for another talk. Our role as designer in Africa is to design products that are practical, beautiful, and inexpensive. Design in Africa equals to economic value. Design can transform garbage into sellable goods, like this taboo collection that I designed, and it's made in Senegal, made with recycled plastic, called the taboo. Design can transform traditional know-how of artisans into new original product to sell. This is a chair that we were doing for Moroso, a company based in Italy. It can leapfrog the industrial revolution and tap into the digital revolution. This picture was taken in ESDI, which is a fab lab in Dakar. And Modu here, he created a CNC machine from everything that he could have in Dakar. He created a CNC machine, and also he created a 3D printing machine in Dakar, in Senegal. Design can dress Beyoncé. I don't know if you know Célie Rabican, but Célie Rabican, she's a fashion designer from Senegal, and she did a buzz, a few months ago when we saw Beyoncé wearing the outfit that she designs. This is Célie. So it can dress Beyoncé, and it can dress the beautiful woman of Dakar, like Célie Rabican. It can also inspire and connect people, like a conference like Design Indaba in South Africa. And it can create enthusiast people. And these are just a few examples from my friends and myself. There is so much opportunity and so much to do. Well, frequently, people, they ask me, okay, what is a design reference for you? Well, 30 years ago, I will say, a reference for a good design was the big lighter, Big lighter, and with one movement, you lighted the flame. But for me today, it's the Hippo roller. Designed first by 2 South African men and improved by a young designer called Émilie Piloton. A design reference from our own borders. A good design empowers people. I think you know this product. It was a product to help the woman to go fetch the water by the river and bring it back home. So good design empowers people. A year ago, I joined a project with IKEA, with 9 other designers from Africa. So there was designer from Kenya, from Senegal, from Egypt, from Rwanda, Ivory Coast, a few of them, and some from South Africa. So the goal is to design a collection of products for IKEA that will represent our culture and our needs. And this is what I call the democratization of design. But as you know, I will repeat this, design is in our DNA. Making things with this artisan is also in our DNA as well. What will happen if we pull from our DNA the power to create the industry that will generate jobs by producing goods for us? Actually, how are we going to empower the continent? I feel an urgency to showcase the resourcefulness of African as maker and designer. There's a creative revolution on its way, growing in our mind. We miss the industrial revolution, but we won't miss the creative revolution. Thank you very much.